Thank you. Thanks very, very much, Frank. Thanks for the invitation to come here and be part of this. I appreciate this. I love coming to New Hampshire. You all know that. I might be the only member of Congress in the House or Senate that actually can go to Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina even in the same week and start no rumors about running for president. And so you know that I'm not here for anything. I'm not asking for your vote. I just really appreciate your hospitality and the importance and the role that you play in the direction of this country. And so from my standpoint, being from Iowa, where we're First in the Nation caucus, we're great respecters of the First in the Nation primary. And we're great encouragers of the people down in South Carolina who we get to make a recommendation. New Hampshire will decide whether you're going to support our recommendation or give a different recommendation. That recommendation is going to go to South Carolina. And those folks down there have to pay attention to what goes on in Iowa and in New Hampshire because they're the ones that can actually put the kiss of the nomination on a candidate. So this is a big deal per capita. I tell Iowans, per capita, you have more to say about who will be the next president of the United States than anybody in the country. But I don't know that I can make that argument convincingly here in New Hampshire. You have a lot to say about it, too. But I'm glad that's an open question because I think a lot of the people in the early states and across this country, and our founding fathers thought a lot about the judgment of the people in this country because they handed all of the authority to run this government over to the people. Actually, God handed it to the people, and our founding fathers recognized that and laid that out in the Declaration, and it's reflected in our Constitution. And we get away from that, and we get away from that because people are power hungry, because they lose their connection to our roots. And I've watched as this struggle goes on. Our founding fathers, for example, set up 3 branches of government, and the static tension between them, they believed that each branch of government would jealously protect the authority that's established for it within the Articles 1, 2, and 3 of the Constitution. They didn't expect that one branch of government would recede, the legislative branch, and let the executive and judicial branch take over. But I digress. I really want to say this about the topics that Frank Gaffney has brought up and the ones that you'll hear about today. If we're going to hold our country together, I saw this on a library down in southern Mexico, and it's painted on the gable end of this little old library in a little old town somewhere down there. I've forgotten the name of the town. It said, "A culture lives in the hearts and minds of its people." And I took a picture of that because it just captured how we need to think about this. If we lose our culture, we lose our civilization. All of the components that you've heard Frank talk about in his opening, and the components you'll talk about and hear about the rest of today, cannot be sustained unless our culture sustains it. It's the sovereignty of we the people, but it's the reflection of our culture and our civilization. What do we believe in? And do we believe in this God-given power? And do we have a moral foundation? Do we know where our place is in history and our role and our obligations to the rest of the world? So I'd like to just dial this thing back, and a long ways back actually, and briefly go through some things. I have an article that at least my staff advises me is posted in National Review Online, and it's about how to defeat Islamic jihad. And one of the phrases in the title is, at least it should be in the title, that's how I wrote it, "Noce Hostem," which is Latin for "know thy enemy." And so when I look back across this Islamic jihad, I think, how is it we understand this enemy? We didn't know very much about it. We weren't in a battle with Islamic jihad on September 11th, 2001. The American heart and mind of our culture wasn't thinking about the residue of the Crusades from 1,000 years earlier. We were just moving forward in the 20th century, well, in the 21st century, just into the 21st century, and going to work and raising our families and doing the things we were doing. But they were thinking about it. And I know they were thinking about it. So in that, I take things back to 732 AD. Well, first 632 AD. That's when Muhammad died. And within the next century, and for the last 20 years of his life and the 100 years after, they set about conquering what was essentially the known world at the time. From about 20 years before his death on up to 732 AD. They'd conquered almost everything that they knew of, and they were moving west into Europe, where they met Charles Martel at Tours in 732 AD. And Charles the Hammer faced the cavalry of the Islamists then but the cavalry, the Islamists, made the mistake of charging into the forest where the infantry was with their pikes. And that was a tactical error. And Charles Martel and the French routed the Muslim armies of the time, their cavalry and their infantry at the time, and scattered their bones across the plains outside of Tours. And they left their bones lay there to send a message. Now, it was a long time before they came back again, but they came back and tried over and over again. There were big battles. Last night we talked about 1571, October 7th, the Battle of Lepanto, when the Holy Navy of the Pope took on the Ottoman Navy in the Aegean Sea and sunk some, not quite 250 ships, almost all of their ships, and decimated the navy that was going to invade and take over the Western world, Western Christendom, as Churchill described it. Well, then in 1683, the Ottomans surrounded Vienna. They had been invading, occupying, sieging city after city, rape, pillage, behead in numbers that we've not imagined to this day. And when they surrounded and besieged Vienna, it was a matter of time till Vienna fell. If Vienna fell, most historians will say all of Western Europe would have fallen and Christianity would have been crushed before there ever was an America. But the relief came in the form of 3 German kings and their infantries and the Polish cavalry. And in the afternoon and evening of September 11th, 1683, the forces of the West came to a place in a raised church called the Kallenberg Church. It's on a mountain that overlooks Vienna, and they held a service there, and they prayed God's deliverance from the hordes that were attacking them, the Islamic hordes. And the battle had engaged September 11th. In the morning of September 12th, they mounted an all-out assault on a relief assault on the Turkish forces and routed them. And especially King Jan Sobieski, who commanded the Polish cavalry. I like the narrative that the Turks all stopped and bowed towards Mecca, and their posteriors were in the wrong direction to defend themselves against the Polish cavalry. That's my narrative, and I'm sticking with it. But September 11th, then again, that was 1683, 1697, the Battle of Zenta, where Prince Eugene caught a huge Turkish army crossing the river with their artillery on one side and their infantry to defend it on the other side, late in the afternoon, after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, September 11th, and he had just moments to make a decision. He decided to throw everything he had, however they were weaker than the Turks, at them, and they defeated them and killed tens of thousands of the Islamists there at that river on September 11th, 1697. And, let's see, 1922 was when the British mandate for Palestine came down. What date? September 11th. You're starting to get the theme here, aren't you? They know. They remember their history, and they target their attacks on us to coincide. Fast forward now. 1972, Munich Olympics, where they came in and killed 11 Israeli athletes on September 11th, 1972 at Munich. And we could go on. 2001, New York, Pentagon, Pennsylvania. And 2012, Benghazi. There likely are others. But that gives you a theme. These guys can hold a grudge. 1,400 years they hold a grudge. And we sit here like we're not really facing an enemy and we just want to be nice. And our president says, well, if you'll unclench your fist, we'll extend our hand. And by the way, now we'll give you a desert full of ICBMs, nuclear-tipped ICBMs. That's essentially what happens 10 to 12 years down the road under this deal. What's wrong with our culture that we can't see this and we can't come together? We elected Barack Obama, then we re-elected Barack Obama, and the second term is a lot worse than the first, so I'll give that little concession to the American people. Maybe they didn't see it. They, by golly, better see it now. And we have to do something more than just elect a president. But we've got to pull our country together. We've got to raise our children right. We've got to teach them history. We've got to teach them our faith. We've got to teach them our values and let them know there's a destiny for us. And we are the leaders today of the free world. It is not any longer, and hasn't for a long time, been Western Europe. They've drifted off into a level of decadence that I believe can be resurrected back to some vigor that they had before. But think of who we are. We are Western civilization, and we are a superior civilization. And that each time that we've been challenged by other civilizations, we have risen up, we've met the call. Whatever we had to do from an economic standpoint, free enterprise managed our economy for us, and the vigor that grows from a less fettered, but not today any longer an unfettered free enterprise economy, produces the resources to defeat our enemies. And if anybody wonders about that, when Jeane Kirkpatrick stepped down as United Nations ambassador under Ronald Reagan in 1984, it was the height of the Cold War. And she said on her departure, what's going on in this Cold War is the equivalent of playing chess and Monopoly on the same board. And the question that remains is, will the United States of America bankrupt the Soviet Union before they bankrupt the Soviet Union economically before they checkmate us militarily? Well, now we know the answer to that. That answer came about November 9th of 1989 when the wall came down and it cascaded across Europe. But it was the vigor of our economy and the conviction that we had as a people that brought Ronald Reagan forward and supported the tremendous leader that he was. That's our civilization and our culture, reflecting the best that we had. And we need to do this again and again and again. But it's got to be in the hearts and minds of our people. And it isn't going to be there if we don't teach our young people where we came from, why we're a great nation, and stand up as a great nation. And we've been watching as a president here and a president there has decided to, I remember saying during the Clinton administration that Bill Clinton apologized to every continent. I don't think I was fair to him. I don't think he went to Antarctica, and that is a continent. And, wait, maybe Barack Obama will get down there and apologize to some penguins and some seals yet. But he should apologize to the seals, actually. And that's... So, piece after piece of this, a strong military, we can defeat radical Islam. We can defeat Islamic jihad. And you have to defeat the ideology. And when I say that, there might be some less optimistic people listening in that will think, you can't defeat an ideology. You can't change a culture. And I remember in one of those debates, I had someone bring that up, a fairly learned fella, and he said, well, you can't change a culture. And I said, tell that to the Japanese. And he was stumped because their culture did change, and actually they're the beneficiaries of us changing their culture for them. They're good friends today, and I go there, and I'm glad we have them for friends. But we defeated the ideology of the Nazis, of the Italian fascists, of the Japanese imperialists, and then we turned around and the Iron Curtain descended across Europe, and then we had to fight a Cold War for 45 years. But we defeated that ideology too, at least temporarily. It lives out there, but we defeated it at least temporarily. We can do this again. It was kinetic activity with economic and industrial strength that did that in the Second World War. It was the economic and cultural strength of the free world that did so in the Cold War. And it takes that economic and cultural strength of Western civilization and Americanism to defeat Islamic jihad, but the tactics are different. We must go after them, play not just defensive, but offensive cyber warfare. And economic warfare, we shut down their resources and begin to diminish and reduce and eliminate, if we can, their madrasas that are teaching their hatred into the next generation, because it is their culture that produces Islamic jihad. And we need to build strong alliances with the moderate Muslims in the Middle East, people like President El-Sisi of Egypt, who has a chance to become the modern-day Ataturk, because he has reached out across these lines and he rejects Sharia law, and he believes that the idea that Muslims have to kill others in order to somehow reach their level of salvation is a disgusting concept, and he's essentially said so. And then with expanded human intelligence and with our special operations supporting people like the Kurds and an alliance of the moderate Muslims, we can not just only defeat ISIS, but defeat this ideology around the world. And on the immigration side of this, which I've been engaged in for a long time, it boils down to this: the rule of law. You're either going to have the rule of law or you're going to have anarchy. And so I side with the rule of law. And you notice the people that are for amnesty, they're the ones that make race and ethnicity an issue. Because the reason is they've lost the argument, and they were reduced to calling names. And temporarily, if they call names, it causes some people to back off. Well, not me. And so I'm happy to have this debate with them. If all they can do is call me names, and I'm going to say, how are you going to advocate for the destruction of the rule of law and for anarchy and the descending down into third world status? This nation is a nation that has to lead the world. If we fail to do so, if we don't spin up our economy, restore our faith in who we are as a people, restore our work ethic, get some of those 94 million people that are sitting on that are in that hammock that used to be a safety net, get them back to work again, expand the GDP of this country, but expand our faith in who we are and stop apologizing and lead the world. We need to lead the world with the right leader. And so so that is, secure the border is really pretty easy. I'm glad Donald Trump is making this a big issue. I'd add this advice to him, and that is, yes, let's build not just a wall. I have long said, let's build a fence, a wall, and a fence. I want to have a road on either side of that wall so we can patrol it, and there's 2 no man's lands for us to round some people up in. But we don't have to build 2,000 miles of it, but here's my standard. Just build it till they stop going around the ends. That's... and so secure the border, restore the respect for the rule of law. Without it, we cannot be a civilization, anything any better than third world. Believe in ourselves again, restore and enforce domestic law. And by the way, when people come over here and live in the shadows and then they come to us and protest out in the open that we're supposed to somehow give them a path to citizenship because we're making them live in the shadows, they came here to live in the shadows. We don't have a moral obligation to pull them out of the shadows. I just say get right with the law. And that's the point in this. It is, central piece is the rule of law. So there's a great, big, beautiful country. I loved it the way it was. And it can be like that again. We have the people to do that, and I get to travel in this country and meet a lot of you like that. And I know I promised I'd open this up for some questions, so I appreciate the chance to say some words today. And I'm open to questions, comments, and in lieu of silence, criticism. So thank you.